Hi guys, this is William and welcome to the fifth video where we will discuss inventory setup. So in this video we will discuss how to add an inventory interface to your game, as well as creating an inventory object and then creating an inventory item on your game screen, because those are two separate things which we'll get to, and how to pick up that object and add it to your inventory interface. So once again, keep in mind you've got the interface project files that you can just load up. There's a scene and a scene underscore completed, so just follow the link to grab those. Okay, so to look at that, what we'll do is we'll quickly look at the documentation that comes with this project. So the first thing to note is that the inventory needs to be created as a separate graphic, right? That's quite important. The interface itself needs to span the width of the resolution of the game properties area. Now this is what we're going to do in this exercise. Obviously it depends on how big your interface area is and how you're going to deal with that. But for our purposes, it will span the whole bottom section of the screen. So if the width of your game is 1920, like we can see here in the resolution, then my interface graphic will be 1920. The height will simply be depending on how high do I want it to be. So this is the background and this is how it will look on screen. If I want this to be 200, I can do that. If I want it to be 150, I can do that. Then the last thing you need to do is you need to add individual blocks, evenly spaced, that will be the individual areas where items are added, right? So what we will do to create this is we will now start by first creating our interface. So to do that, I will go to the interfaces area right there, and I will create a new interface called inventory. And I do this by clicking on this little plus icon, and I will call this inventory. Okay. Now we need to allocate the background graphic for the inventory. So that exact image that I showed you a few seconds ago. To do that, we are going to make sure our interface is selected, click on properties, and here in the background image, we are going to find and add in that image. And you can find it under inventory interfaces. It's right there. So now that we have that, I can see it appeared on screen here in the background. Now just one more thing, the class, we need to set that to inventory. So the class is a classification of your interfaces, and the classification is used in action parts to reference interfaces. Right? So in later videos, we'll cover that in a bit more detail. The one last thing I quickly want to show you here is just the displacement. This will affect where it appears on screen, and you've got several options right here. I'm going to choose bottom because I want it to appear at the bottom of the screen. Okay, great. So the next thing we need to do is we have our graphic, but now we need to create the individual slots. We need to create the individual slots and then set the object area on each of these slots. So to do that, I'm going to use this plus button and I'm going to create my first slot, and I'm going to call it slot 1. I'm going to create another one and call it slot 2, and so on. So I'll right click and I'll duplicate that and call this slot 3. So for this exercise, we'll only do 4 slots. The next thing you need to do is you need to set the button type on the properties. So right now, if I select one of these buttons, it is set to action area. You need to set each of these to placeholder for items. The next thing we need to do is we need to define the object area. So if we look at slot 1, what is the area on the graphic that represents? Now to do that, we're going to select it and click on this button, create and edit object areas. Remember, you can zoom in and out as well. I'm going to click on that and I am going to then draw out my object area. Now what I'm doing is I'm holding down shift, and that is constraining it to straight lines. which is a bit handy. Otherwise, you would have to guess. But now, this is a common mistake that people make. The tendency is to immediately go over into this area to do the second one. You remember that you have to choose the slot and then set the object area, like I'm doing right now. Otherwise, you're just setting additional object areas on this slot you've got chosen. Now I choose slot 3. And I do create it. And slot 4. Now obviously, in a real world example, I would do all the additional slots. But I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to go up to 4. But you can obviously add as many as you want. So now that we've created our slots, we have our inventory, we have the graphic, we have the individual slots. Now we need to allocate the interface to our character. And to do that, click on the character area, choose your main character, go to interfaces, and then tick inventory. And that then means that the inventory will be used by this character. And note what I did. I pressed Ctrl S to save my changes, right? That's a very good item. That's handy to do. So we can now play our scene. So I'm going to quickly click there. And one thing I wanted to show you here is I can run the game or I can run on scene. So really what this means is if I wanted to see how the hallway would function, this is not set as my first scene to load. I could just simply say run game on scene and then I can check how this works. Right? But I'm going to click here, I'm going to run scene. And look at that, there is my interface. The recording is cut off a bit, but hopefully you can see that this is the interface area right there. Okay, it's there at the bottom. Okay, so now we have our interface and it's ready to go. But now we want to have an object in the world that we can pick up and add to our inventory. Now, to do that, we need to do two things. We need to create an inventory object right here, and then we need to create the world representation of that object. So it's two separate things that we're creating. Okay, it's important to understand. So let's create the inventory object, the object that will be in the inventory when you've picked it up. So click on the inventory area right here, and then click on the plus icon, and here we're going to type in key, because this will be a key object that we've got. Now give it a name in the object name field, right? And then choose the key graphic by clicking here. Now I've provided this to you, inventory items key. Choose that. And now the first step is done. We have our inventory version of the object. Now we need to put that object in the world as well. So I'm going to go back to my scene and I am going to add a new object by clicking on the plus icon here. And I'm going to call this key on screen, because that's what it is. It's the key on the screen. And now we need to set the properties as we always do with new objects. So the first thing is I'm going to give it an object name. I'm going to allocate an image by clicking there. I'm going to choose the same image. Now, as soon as I did that, look there. It appeared on screen. I can then use my place image and animation tool by clicking on that and then move it. So let's move it right there. And then I need to set the position. So where does our character walk to when he wants to interact with this? So I click on that little button, and then I can click here to have my character walk to there. I also need to set the hotspot, right? And I do that by clicking on create and edit object area. I'm just going to click like so. And there you go. And my hotspot is done. The last thing is I'm just going to set the facing direction as well by clicking there. So now my character will face this way because I put my position here. Character will walk to here, face this way, and pick that up. Good. So now the next thing I need to do is I need to put action parts in, because I need to tell Visionaire, when you use that object, add it to my inventory. So now we want to add the key to our inventory. And I do this by using the action parts. So make sure key on screen is selected, click actions, and add a new command. Here I will choose use. So when you use this object, do the following. What do we want to have done? I'm going to add a new action part by clicking on the plus. And what do we want to do? We want to interfaces, add, remove, item. So here I can now choose. I want to add item key. So this is what's going to happen. I've got the on-screen representation, key on screen. I'm going to use it. When I use it, it's going to add the key item I created in my inventory area, right there, my item area, and add that to my interfaces, my inventory interface. So let's take a look. So I'm going to click there, and there you go. You can see it's been added. The recording cut it off a bit, but you get the general idea. So here we have the key. It's added to my inventory. And that's it. But there's one more thing that you can note here, that when I actually use the key, you see it still remains in the game world. That's not right. This should have disappeared. Now, we won't cover this in this video. We'll cover that in the next video, because that has to deal with conditions. And how do conditions work? What conditions, how do we use conditions? How do we set something to be active or inactive in the world? So that's a bit out of scope for this video, but we will cover that in the next video. So see you then.